Flying helicopters in a simulator is hard, but once it clicks, it's incredibly satisfying, and I want to help you get there. I'm Matthew, and I've made a ton of helicopter tutorials and reviews for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, but everything in this video applies no matter what sim you fly. If you're a total beginner or you've forgotten everything since the last time you tried to hover, this video is for you. I'll take you through the core helicopter controls, how to lift into a hover, transition into forward flight, trim properly, and bring it all back down for a smooth landing. And if you want to go deeper, I'll link my more advanced tutorials throughout the video. Are you ready to stop fighting the helicopter and start flying it? Let's make it happen and let's fly. And when you're first learning, I recommend you start off with a light, simple training helicopter like the R22, for instance, or this Cabri G2. And you can make this easier for yourself by choosing calm weather. I've chosen the MSFS Few Clouds preset, and I've taken the wind here down to 0, so I've got nothing to think about there. And another thing we can do is fill this weight up a bit higher so that we're going to be near our maximum weight. So that'll just make the helicopter a little bit less twitchy as well. Now, in a helicopter, we have got 3 types of controls all visible to you on the screen right now. And the one I'm going to start with is the collective control. That's this one here. Now, collective is not the same as throttle. So I'm going to have to tell you a little bit about the difference here. So in a lot of helicopters, at the end of the collective lever, we've got this throttle here, which in the case of the Cabri, we turn outwards to increase the engine RPM. Now, this is not what gives us our up and down thrust by itself. What actually happens when we lower and raise the collective lever is this. I pull the lever and the swash plate at the bottom there rises and actuates the pitch there on all 3 blades collectively. That's why it's called collective. And what that does then with the pitch increased is gives the helicopter more lift. And then lowering the collective, the pitch decreases on the 3 blades and we get less lift then. So why isn't the throttle important? Well, in most helicopters, there's something called a governor, and it's the job of the governor to regulate the throttle so that the engine is supplying enough power to keep the blades spinning at the optimum RPM. Now, because this is not the same as a throttle, this collective lever, it has its own axis inside the flight simulator, and you can't just use a fixed-wing aircraft preset for your controls on your helicopter. So I've got a whole separate guide to setting up your controls for helicopters in MSFS, and you can click on that up there. So then, what about these pedals up front? These are not rudder pedals. The helicopter does not have a rudder. On helicopters, we've got a vertical fin on this Cabri, that's a vertical stabilizer. But enclosed in there is a fenestron type of tail rotor. Now, this doesn't really have any operational difference. You still use the pedals to change the pitch on this, just like we use the collective to change the pitch on the main rotor. So why is it called anti-torque? Well, the main rotor system on the Cabri and most French helicopters, when viewed from above, spins clockwise, so you can kind of get the sense there that that's the leading edge of the blade, and with this spinning in a clockwise direction, that's going to have a torque effect on the rest of the helicopter. That means the nose is going to want to point to the left. When we increase the pitch on this main rotor, the nose will yaw further and harder to the left. And so operationally, what that means is when we're lifting off, we're going to be adding right pedal in here. And the more collective pitch we add, the more right pedal we're going to be putting in. So that's what that's going to look like down there. Now, if you do not have a pedal controller like I do, I highly recommend you look at the assisted tail rotor option. Even a twist grip on a joystick is going to make it pretty difficult to control these accurately. You need a fine deal of balance here. If you don't have a nice pedal controller, please instead opt for using the assisted tail rotor. If you don't, you are asking for an enormous amount of frustration, believe me. And the last control is kind of the most obvious one. They're the cyclic controller, the stick. And I'll have to keep this pretty simple because this is an amazing piece of engineering here in this wash plate. This can tilt in such a way that it will impart a change in pitch to an individual blade as it rolls over a particular point in the cycle as this thing is spinning at like 500 RPM. And so what that does in practice is that when I push the stick to the left, the helicopter will roll to the left. When I push it to the right, it will roll to the right. When I push it forward, it will nose down. And when I pull it back, it will nose up. There aren't any control surfaces like ailerons or elevators on a helicopter. It's all done through the main rotor, a phenomenal piece of engineering. And so these three sets of controls all need to be operated in harmony with each other. It's a fine balance, and it's one that's going to require some practice. And for this, I've turned multiplayer off and I've brought the helicopter over onto the runway, and that's just going to help me get a bit of visual reference as I pick up and come into a hover. So the pickup, what do we need to be aware of? Two things. Having an awareness of what the helicopter is going to do before it does it. So we'll talk about that in a moment. And also using your sensors, primarily in the simulator, that's going to be vision, to look further out from the helicopter so that we don't overcorrect and fight ourselves and get into something like a pilot-induced oscillation where we're just going backwards and forwards, stirring the pot, they sometimes call it. If you want to know what my gear is, it's in the video description. If you want to know what the input viewer is, the chart that shows the position of the controls, that's a free tool available to you on flightsim.to, and the link is in the video description. Okay, let's go. We know that we are going to need some right pedal, so I'm going to have that ready there. That right pedal is going to introduce something called translating tendency. So the helicopter is going to want to move to the left with all of that right thrust pointing that way. And there it is. I can show you on the computational fluid dynamics overlay here, pretty fancy. Look at those strong lines of thrust coming out of the right-hand side of the tail rotor. That's what's pushing the helicopter over to the left. So, to counteract that, I will need some right cyclic, there it is, and possibly a little bit of aft cyclic as well. So I'm now going to turn on the head tracking, look down the end of the runway, pull collective. You can see it coming up on the meter. We're going to wait until the helicopter is light on its skids. We don't just yank the thing up to 100%. It's not like a throttle in a fixed-wing aircraft. We're just teetering there. Need a little bit more right cyclic. And now all assists are off. I am looking down the end of the runway, soft gaze. I'm using my sensors to counteract the little tiny micro gusts. Even with the wind calm, there's still little bits of air moving through the simulator. It's a very complex fluid dynamics model that's at work here in MSFS. And we've got a nice stable hover there. So I'm going to set it back down. And a little bit forceful. So once more, looking out again, one more pickup. And just softly gazing down, sitting into this hover. We become in the hover aware of our attitude. So rather than once we're off the ground, rather than worrying excessively about the position of our controls, it's about the relationship of the horizon versus the top of the console here. And if I can maintain that relationship, then the helicopter will remain in a steady hover. If I'm looking down close and I'm trying to look at the bottom of the numbers there, we get into this kind of thing where you fight yourself and, you know, you go, this is like a pilot-induced oscillation. I'm faking it, but I'm just doing it by looking down at the bottom of the one instead of much further off in the distance. Looking out is much better in a hover than looking down. And with that done, we can start to experiment with things like a little translation over to the right, keeping the heading the same, and then cancelling that out. And a little translation off to the left. And then cancelling that out back on the runway centre line. You can see why I chose the runway. You get great visibility. And from a stable hover, you could try something like a pedal turn, which is just adding just enough right pedal in this case to achieve a 90-degree turn here. Trying to stop it from going backwards there. And then just softly letting it come back again. Looking down the runway, keeping that hover. This is a lot of practice to do this. Note how little the controls are moving. I'm trying to resist the urge to constantly control and overcorrect. Keep it minimal, keep it smooth. I use 1-to-1 linear sensitivity on these controls because these controls are pretty high resolution and smooth. I've got a whole tutorial on different approaches to sensitivity that might help you in your hovering journey. Alright, transition to forward flight. Now, again, we don't need to add power. We can simply nose down, and what's going to happen here is the helicopter is going to find itself with the... I'm not even adding power, and it's just lifting off by itself. It's because I started moving forward, and therefore the rotor, which was previously operating in very mixed turbulent air because of the downwash, the vortices produced by the rotor system itself. When I started moving forward, we started to move out of our own downwash, and we got a free boost of lift. This is something called ETL, Effective Translational Lift. It's an important helicopter phenomenon that will be important to us when we do our approach as well. And here's what it looks like in the overlay again. So look at all of that rough air, which as we start moving forwards, look how much smoother it gets. Now we've got that clean flow over the rotor. That is what effective translational lift looks like. And as I just mentioned, when we come into the approach, everything there will be reversed and we will find ourselves adding more collective, and therefore we need to be ready on this French helicopter with the right pedal when we do that. So here we are on a downwind leg, and I'm holding the stick forwards the whole time at the moment. So rather than getting a tired arm, because I'm pushing lightly into the rubber boot of the stick, I'm just going to use my hat switch, which is where my cyclic or rotor trim is, and I'll just push that forward a few steps, and it's actually flying pretty much hands-free right now. If you find yourself still climbing or descending, it's climbing right now, you could just reduce the collective a little bit, and that will help to cancel that out there. So the view's changing there because my eyes are being tracked, and it's just going down to the VSI instrument down the bottom left there. And so I'm nice and level now, and that was through adjusting not the trim, but the collective. Now it's going down, I pull a bit more collective, and that will bring us back up again. Now, I have done a full video on helicopter trim in Microsoft Flight Simulator, so there is that one for you. And if you find my tutorial content helpful, there's a few things that you could do to take your skills further. One is to practice. Practice in helicopter is rewarded with a very satisfying increase in your skills. I highly recommend that. We've got a Discord community going. We do group flights, which can be a bit chaotic and silly, but also scenically beautiful. Always in helicopters, always landing in some interesting places. If it's open to you to be able to throw in a few dollars to help support what I'm doing with the community and with these tutorials, you could use something like Buy Me a Coffee or Super Thanks here in YouTube. So we're on our downwind leg now. I'm just going to commence a left turn, just rolling gently to the left. That wool indicator on the windshield is telling me we're pretty much in good smooth air right now. I don't need to do anything with the pedals. That tells you you push it in the opposite direction. So if that was going over to the right, like it is now because I'm faking it, you would move your pedals over to the left. And now we're on final. So what I'm going to try and do is land us exactly where we took off. And the way I'm going to achieve that is by lowering the collective. To slow down in the helicopter, what we do is we lower the collective and raise the nose. And then you see the speed descending quite rapidly now. That's in fact too rapidly. So I'll just let it the nose go down a bit to gain speed. So when we're descending, the fore and aft cyclic controls your rate of acceleration or deceleration, and your collective up or down controls how quickly you're descending. So I'll just try and keep that 1.7 in the same place just above the glare shield there. And we come out of effective translational lift, which means we're going to need more collective, which means we'll need more right pedal. So there's the right pedal going in now as I raise collective. You saw the nose wanting to go off to the left a bit there. And we've managed to come back down to the same point where we started. And they say that all flights start and end with a hover. So this is a good practice. Get you a nice hover and then just a millimeter down onto the collective, and then we allow, without that translation occurring, we allow that first skid to make contact. straightened it up there as we were on one skid, and lowering the collective slowly all the way down. And I do, of course, have a full tutorial on how to do a nice, successful, smooth approach as well. There's the link again. So I want to talk about controls just for a moment. The best controls for you to learn helicopter flight are the ones that you currently have. However, if it is open to you to select a joystick that, for your cyclic control, that is very lightly sprung and has a lot of resolution in the very center of the range, then you're going to make it easier for yourself as you develop your skills. Something else that's going to make it easier is if you are kind to yourself. Flying a manual helicopter is not easy. It takes a while for all of your skills to develop and come together. So good luck with that. Be patient and kind to yourself. And of course, check into any of those many other tutorials I've been linking to. I'll catch you in another one of those real soon. See ya.